Baldur's Gate 3 is an insane anomaly. It's actually crazy to see just how many people are still engaging with the game. Not only does it deserve all of the accolades, but the long-term retention of this game has been kind of amazing to see, especially for a single-player title. The numbers we're seeing for this game you'd expect out of a live service. Now, I don't have to tell you about the fact that this game got universal acclaim. 96% Metascore from 117 critic reviews. It recently won Game of the Year, and this game is just riding high and celebrating as it deserves to. Now, let's take a look at Steam charts numbers. Looking at these figures, you'd expect that this is information from, a couple days or a couple weeks after the game has launched, but this is right now, ladies and gentlemen. This is months after Baldur's Gate 3's release. The game launched on August 3rd, 2023, so it's been September, October, November, December, January. It has been almost 5 months, and yet this game is still retaining roughly 30% of its all-time peak player number of 875,343 according to Steam charts. And looking at the graph itself, you can see the peak number of players every week since launch, and obviously the game had the most amount of players around launch time. But after that, you can see that it was still in the six figures, and it eventually evened out in roughly the 200,000s kind of figure. But you can see that after a dip, it just rises back up, and now we're seeing it really rise up following its Game of the Year award win. Following the Game Awards and following the holiday season, this game got a significant boost in player numbers, and it's hovering at player numbers that even live services wish they could have. And then scrolling down, if you look at average players, you can see that it started out really strong at 450,000, and then it obviously slowly dipped, but still in the six figures. And over the last 30 days, the average players is looking higher than it was in the last 2 months. Usually the trend with single player games is people are slowly but surely finishing them and eventually kind of tank, and it kind of peters out with only the most hardcore of players remaining to replay the game or whatnot. But the thing about Baldur's Gate 3 and what makes it so special is that aside from the incredibly high bar it's set in terms of quality, the storytelling, the characters who are so beloved, the gameplay, the RPG and progression systems, just it being such an addictively fun game aside, it is also extremely replayable, not only because the campaign is extremely long and narrative developments can occur so differently based on your choices, but also the fact that the game encourages you to play through it a second time because you can not only play as a custom character, but also characters with their own background stories, and you can also make new choices with those characters. And then there's like the Dark Urge, which is essentially a whole story within itself if you follow that path and lean into the dark urges, if you will, combined with the fact that there's so much gameplay variance because of all of the different classes that they pulled from Dungeons and Dragons, and there's so many different abilities and ways you can customize your character, and in turn combat can feel vastly different depending on how you customize and create your own character, what class you pick, what abilities you kind of lean towards, combined with what your party composition is. There's so much just variance in this game, combined with the fact that it's such a long campaign, combined with the fact that there's so many different ways things can play out, that this is one of those games that, the density of it is insane, and you can keep playing it for what feels like forever, essentially, because with every playthrough, it feels like you're discovering something new about this game. The combination and culmination of all of that is player numbers that are completely unprecedented for a single-player experience. Look at this data on the homepage of Steam charts. If you look at the top games in terms of concurrent players right now, as I'm recording this, Baldur's Gate 3 is third place, only beaten out by Dota 2 and Counter-Strike 2 in terms of total current concurrent players. It has beat out PUBG, Battlegrounds, Grand Theft Auto Online, Team Fortress 2, Rust, Call of Duty, the Finals, all these games that are live service. The fact that these games are being beaten out by a single player game that has been out for 5 months, at which point many other single player games tend to peter out and not see these kinds of numbers. Like, that really highlights the kind of achievement that Baldur's Gate 3 is, even compared to other more single-player focused, campaign-focused experiences that saw huge successes on Steam. Baldur's Gate 3 is kind of at a level above. So Elden Ring, for example, you can see that there's still plenty of people playing this game, which is amazing. And this had an all-time peak of almost 1 million players. But the retention of its player base, you can see that 5 months later, we got down into the 5 digits instead of the 6 digits that Baldur's Gate 3 retained after 5 months. Though, again, this player base is still going very strong. So, and I mean, once the DLC comes out, I imagine that these numbers will peak again. And then Cyberpunk 2077, the all-time peak for this is somewhere between 800,000 and 1 million, based on whether you go to Steam charts or other Steam data pages. But you can see that, I mean, this had a really strong start, and then player numbers dipped into the mid to low 5 digits, which is still strong numbers for a single-player game. You can see that these numbers dipped back up after the release of certain patches, after the release of Cyberpunk Edge Runners, and after the release of the game's expansion. So that's also showing just how much people engage with single-player experiences when they're comprehensive and extensive and fun and high quality. And, with Cyberpunk, once they're in a good place. But Baldur's Gate 3, man, this is a juggernaut unlike anything I've ever seen. Again, we're talking about 6 months in a row that this game is at pretty good 6 figures numbers. And not just peak players, but also average players are retaining 6 figures. As far as single-player games on Steam goes, I've never seen anything like this ever. This is literally completely unprecedented, even by the high standards established by releases like Elden Ring and Cyberpunk. And this is just Steam numbers, keep that in mind. I can only imagine what figures look like on PlayStation and Xbox. If you combine all of those figures, the concurrent player numbers for Baldur's Gate 3, the level of engagement that this game has gotten must be through the roof, and above many live services even, which are so obsessed with keeping players engaged that they take certain systems and mechanics and monetization elements too far, and it ends up having the opposite effect, where something like Baldur's Gate 3, the engagement comes because I feel like the game was first and foremost made with the intent of, let's just make the best game possible with no compromises. Anything that compromises the experience, we take out, and that's a result of having leadership like Sven Vink, who runs Larian Studios, which is both the publisher and the developer. And Sven Vink isn't just a suit. He's someone who loves D&D. He's someone who loves this world. He's someone who is a creator, who loves making games. And so when you have a game developer who's passionate about the IP and the game that they're creating at the helm, and when, the people at the top of the pyramid are on the same page as the people below, you get something like this where it is just clearly a work of pure passion with no corruption whatsoever to diminish its full potential. I guess for me, it just really makes me happy to see when games like Baldur's Gate 3 can prove all these corporate heads wrong about this notion that the future of gaming strictly lies in live services. This kind of business model of just like making a game so just rich and so good that people can't resist it is viable. That games don't have to be about trying to manipulate people through the interactive elements and systems and monetization aspects that plague so many games these days. And you can still be a really successful business, and you can be a business that is celebrated beyond just being a business that rakes in a lot of profit, but people view unfavorably because of the shady ways that those, revenues might have been obtained and compromises that might have been made to the overall experience. Baldur's Gate 3 just has none of that. It's such a pure-ass video game, and it's so successful. And seeing these pure video games show that they can succeed at this level, hopefully will encourage more publishers to, greenlight projects like these and give developers the kind of autonomy that helps them realize visions like Baldur's Gate 3, which are incredibly ambitious and not easy to pull off, but are labors of love that can become, legends in gaming history. And, these kinds of companies and franchises can succeed over the long term through the loyalty and goodwill obtained from the community because you did right by the customers and gave them something unforgettable that they'd have no trouble and no qualm paying for. So I just wanted to talk about this because it's a conversation that's cropped up across social media. People checked in to see how well Baldur's Gate 3 is doing, and social media was just shocked to see that these numbers were still retaining such high figures. And we're seeing entire articles talking about the player count of Baldur's Gate 3 and how it's still just riding a wave that we've never seen on Steam at this level from a single player game. So hopefully more of these kinds of experiences will be encouraged and will continue to thrive. And so, yeah, I know this just makes me happy to see. It's just a really great story and a really great situation that I think highlights the best of gaming. And so with that, I would like to conclude this video, and I'd love to hear what your thoughts and opinions are on Baldur's Gate 3's success and where you think something like this will ultimately end up encouraging more games of this nature to be developed by publishers. Share your thoughts below, and to be further updated on all things gaming news, reviews, and discussions, stay tuned right here on Young Yeah. I'll see you guys next time. Young out.